everybody, to another episode of the Canadian Cannabis Podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Fleury of Flourish Ventures Limited. In today's episode, coming out of the West Coast, Salmo, BC, Krystal Autumn, Executive Director of the Unicorn Cup, as well as boasting a fantastic, fabulous list of credentials through the cannabis and music industry. And we're going to tie into all that great information. So with no further ado, Krystal, please introduce yourself on today's episode.
Yeah. My name is Krystal Autumn and came to Canada from Northern. I gathered most of my and created community around Canada. Grateful to be in Canada, to be speaking about cannabis, as well as a board about plant medicine, about layers of awakening the world, and just excited to be on the podcast with Jordan.
I appreciate you, Krystal. I appreciate your time very much, including the dialogue and content build up to this episode. Krystal and I have just spent roughly the last 45 minutes connecting a little bit beyond what I normally would with other guests, and I couldn't help myself really because of the fantastic information you provided, Krystal, in response to the Canadian Cannabis Podcast. While we do, as any viewer has seen, the list of fantastic guests continue to grow. I'm proud to say right now, actually, we're looking at, I've got 3 spots in November, 2 spots in November, and 1 in December, and the entire roster is complete for this season, this 2022 North American Weed Tour. And that is just enough. That alone for me is beyond words what I can describe. As the responses have rolled in, much like from people like yourself, it's always hitting me every night that I'm taking these emails and finding a little bit more about the brand, about the good people behind the industry, and then taking it home really essentially, and what a lot of the education platform stands for and where we are at with things is that also a little bit of that legacy to legal shift. And so your credentials, obviously having no unfamiliarity with cannabis, the industry as it stands, spanning back over the course of 2 decades, ultimately leading up at the executive director of the Unicorn Cup. And before we delve too far into specific industry dialogue, let's focus a little bit about that, the Unicorn Cup. I mean, I learned a bit about it from you. I've been to the website. It's this wonderful 3-day event. You are in the West Coast. And so if we take some time now and educate us a little bit about the Unicorn Cup, your involvement with the Unicorn Cup, and what does the festival really stand for? What are we going to be looking at next year, for example, and how did it come together this year?
There's an incredible event that Che has put together for the past. He came from Alberta over to BC, considered the unicorn in his community, and was the one, playing with cannabis in the mountains of summer. And so he created a competition, but a friendly education event to see, what was happening and, where the cannabis was being created and cultivars were. And then I stepped into the picture and kind of took it public. We invite only last year because COVID we're in dealing with, and we're having like precaution around and restrictions. It was quite small, but it was a lot of industry, like the community and the Kootenays coming, and it's coming together and merging into the space, but also sharing insights about what the industry at the time, what we were all experiencing in the industry, how to band together a little bit more. And we made a platform that allowed the consumer, the producer, and the cultivator and understand what the other person did in the space, basically within the cannabis, because we believe that there's a disconnect. They didn't get to speak to the producer necessarily, cultivator, about what they desire, and so the dispensaries and the people who are to the consumer, they don't have a space, big of a space, to connect with the produce. So that's what the Unicorn Cup is about. It's a community of BC and across Canada to reestablish really the that we have lost a little bit when with the recreation coming instead of it being more medical, and that plant spirit medicine truly is what brings cannabis to the business, to the people through cannabis. So we created hosts during the day. We can educate on all levels, through to professional, educate people on what is street within this year. And then anytime we get to enjoy just like the music festival would host. So this year's headliner was Rosebud, over from Montreal, actually, where you are, Jordan, and also John Rodman of Moontricks. Those were our headliners. It was an incredible show at night, but during the day there was rich content, camaraderie of friendship coming together, and that's really what we design in the Unicorn Cup, and the platform, the space, that with gorgeous Rosebud Lake, which is down in Salmo. It's an alpine lake in between range, but 3 specific mountains, and
beautiful.
In nature, who you are, and to really come into the space of like a forest bathing when you wake up in the morning, and instead of having like the suits and the professional, like, I'm gonna get all suited up to get this is a medicine, and she's a plant as well, and all these things together to bring doing and to bring that culture back. And so yeah, Unicorn Cup is about.
I'm absolutely thrilled. You mentioned like right now in your closing there, absolutely cultural. That's what I'm hearing through and through. I mean, people see it. Anyone that follows Flourish Ventures Limited, between the cannabis culture, cannabis education, cannabis community, the general hashtags, the reach outs, and that bind out of the connectivity that actually exists behind the education platforms, definitely hearing that through and through. And so even moving that to some of that music and weed and food, and then again food and music. So I like a boom, I bring that around, that cultural piece to it. And here in Manitoba, I've been around this summer for 6 events roughly. Nothing over the top, nothing 3 days like that where I was participating 3 days, but definitely a couple of 2-day events, and some out in that forest, off the river in the elements, and then that real cultural piece, while regulations are beginning to ease and lift with here in Manitoba. And I'll talk about it again on this episode, the introduction of cannabis safe consumption spaces, however unofficial or official that is, but understandably so, being identified as part of that culture. So where the music is, where the food trucks are, and mobile cannabis dispensaries now we're looking at, or the friendly invitation by security of allowing you your pre-roll packages, into space, and the blend is there. But anyway, it's being it's being explored, right? And that's what a lot about it is, navigating. And obviously, in your professional experience, in your 2 decades in the industry, exploring the industry and navigating risk taking, I mean, obviously, in boundary pushing has not been without to land in the ED role of this kind of, or the Unicorn Cup. And then everything fantastic in between. And that again, so the culture being part of it, the plant medicine that you speak of though, and I know you emphasize that in your detail in reaching out into the episode, and what content you'd really want to get out. And I think it's important that we do talk a little bit about that. Like, I know practicing Western plant medicine, cannabis herbalist and medicine maker. You know what I mean? That type of strong bind to Mary Jane, so to say, you know, and that real the endocannabinoid system, even, and understanding that the plant life, the biological, and I know mentioned earlier the science behind it, and the corrections in that, but realistically the medicine, the science, you know, and everything that kind of goes in, the formulas by chance, even the mathematics, but breaking that all down to that importance of that spiritual connection, carrying that into some of the products that have won you international awards. Let's hear a bit. I think people need to hear about that for sure, Krystal. Some of the awards you've won, the terpene navigation you've done, some of the other brands you've helped build in your fabulous brand marketing career, please.
Well, I humbly found soil at 19 years old. I chased the plant in New Jersey, and I just knew that this plant spoke to me in a different way than anything else I had ever with in my life, and so I was California, and found and connected with Western plant medicine as a healing modality for myself, for my family, and really honor that space to heal our bodies and to create a lifestyle for ourselves that is in fact. And for me, cannabis was so important that I've dealt with all my life. And so that take a substance that a scientist made, or that our entire system can uptake through the endo. And so I just was so fascinated with that. And so I started to really dial in what it was that was so powerful, you know, that was catalyst to so much healing in the world. And I mean, I can single-handedly say who start to consume cannabis become with nature more able to take in love and feel peace within their field, and the world needs right now. And so that contributing to the ethereal world around us. See, and my partner at the time just is an incredible cannabis. We had an outdoor, indoor. We had him in the mountains of California, and basically always in search of the headies. Now, some of my language is a little different, but
that's all right.
For the best of the best, the headies are like the thing that's like the cherry on top, you know, the thing that like no one tastes, and they're like, I don't want to give this joint up, you know. And so it's like that's what we knew. We didn't even search for it. That is who we understood about cannabis because of our genes that we honed in on, as far as genetic cultivars being matched into one another space, moving forward with some of this creation headband, or using Chem 91 90 strain sour diesel from Asia, and making these new gorgeous like profiles, and then basic headies and concentrates and extracts. And something that I had the amazing and extreme, my former partner, it was Nectar's Collective. Nectar's was a combination person who we named Heisenberg, Eric Ward, and he created, he then named terp juice, because terpene content that you can get on the market with SC Labs at anywhere from to, I don't know, I think our high 1% terpene absolute liquid. It was water, you know, because terpenes molecule, their water, or their water essence, hadn't seen what we were making terpene meant. You know, I probably
Right.
10,000 people dabs for their first dab, and then I've probably taught 5,000 people with the 2012, you know? And so
Yeah.
we just realized education was the most for the community around us, but then also for because the new consumer is the person who will with their experience. And as we know, spirit medicines, you know, like if you have a hard for your first consumption, a time where you have a adverse reaction like an anxiety, you don't want to go back and experience that again.
Right.
So for us, it's really powerful to just give step by step all pieces of education, and you know, and so all during that time, I was still doing herbalist practices. I still am, and combining cannabis with other plants. They calendula with arnica and Saint Jossel and a wound, you know, with these plants, because that's what cannabis is. She is and she allows us to create a around her, because that's her. So I basically have just followed that the entire, honed in on educating about that part of her corporate America, and the people just kind of bringing her into the space of like, oh, she's just like money and $1 million. It's not really her as a plant spirit medicine. And so I've moved forward with that. And, you know, she comes, I'm also a permaculturist and took classes in that, farming practices that just exemplify
Fire though. Yeah.
all of her terpene profiles, regenerative farming and cannabis together, and you are getting no other, because it's of nature, you know. And so however we can tell people about that makes their say, oh, I am responsible for my medicine, or no medicine, or be educated around medicine, that allows us to our consciousness and be pain-free, holistic health perspective. And really passionate about my whole life, and then cannabis most flourishing journey through themselves.
Absolutely. Like, how could it not? I mean, Chem 91, the brands, the strains that you're dropping there, and I think that even just the alone, and again, even emphasizing that, like, really that legacy to legal trans, like that shift in alone, in all in itself. I mean, sorry, but the brand marketing regulations as they've stood. So while we discuss, I mean, strains that you know full well have been around, obviously, you know what I mean. While you're kicking it up, stirring the fire right up, and dipping into the education and science behind the plant, behind herself, as you're describing, to that personal life connectivity, the terpene profile, and the extracts that the full plant usage provides. It's absolutely fabulous to consider now that the brand regulations as they've stand, as strict as they've actually been. While it is, I mean, when we're looking at parental guidance over particular episodes of watching The Simpsons, right? And other analogy use within media, mainstream media. But at the same time, pulling the conversation full circle back in with everything that you've provided as far as your involvement and truthfully in the North American industry. Although we're on the Canadian Cannabis Podcast, I mean, you're pulling in the California market, transitioning to the Canadian market, and then at the same time not slowing down but blowing it up. I mean, to the level where people obviously have benefited from the product, you know what I mean, are familiar to the brand, and then now getting the direct education from it. So is the Unicorn Cup and being involved in festivals, that cultural piece, but is the festival, the music, how important is the music piece Has it been now, or is it beginning to take shape that way as far as the cannabis branding goes? For brands, for festivals, I mean, even local markets, and also large. When we look at the large corporation with celebrity brand sets, like status, so to speak. But if we talk a few minutes about that going, it's 4:20 right now in Manitoba. I don't know if that strikes you. If you've got a product you want to plug while also answering that, by all means, let's talk a little bit about that right now if we can too.
Yeah. So we definitely that we are releasing. We just got both Ontario and BC. There is Sarah's Secret, which is arms, and you can find us online at or at Rosebud Limited on Instagram. We have created, I think, the most healing, mind expanding, fuel forward, but guava, an earth back tastes, undertones. So the cultivar is named, and it's our Sarah's Secret strain that buys to the BC region. We did farm down in, and we're off the grid completely, and all including swales, including times, including some really strict of like capturing the best of Sarah's Secret. We put into our practice our bar none to what others. So Sarah's Secret is one of my favorites. A body forward high with a very euphoric kind of feeling to
Like
it.
an aura. Yeah, I
totally.
feel you. I feel you.
Exactly. Totally. So yeah. So that's currently loving and smoking on outside of indicas that I usually consume for pain and that kind of management. Sarah, heady high to it and a head high, able to work and do all the things that you need to, as well as manage. So I know a lot of people are working on this right now. A lot of people are really trying to bring pain management through their consumption space into their routine with their health, that dynamic. So that's why I continue, because I know that I've had a journey with that myself. People are going through that and don't desire to take that the doctors want to give them now. They just desire to and have it be something that they feel is health and not just a pill. So
definitely. And again, speaking as a bud tender, seeing some of that transition to in the industry, and it's taken a little bit of time as a, let's say, as a consumer, an entrepreneur in the first 2 years of the legal markets, being a bud tender now, and I'm seeing that the education really starting to come through. Obviously, with local foot traffic and regular customers becoming, you know what I mean, more mutual acquaintance. A little bit of that rapport and trust, and you see the education grow. So we have clientele coming in looking for terpene profile. Even the CBD game changing a little bit. Like CBD sales are slower, obviously, but I mean there's a market for it. People are starting to source it, and I find that that's a definite reflective of that. A reflection to that is whether or not they've been documenting their consumption types of like strains, methods of consumption, and starting to learn about the East. Right.
I'm making a T-shirt that says, "What's your terpene profile?" I've been talking to people about terpene profiles. I'm like, do you know what helps your body? Like, figure that out, and then you will know.
That's exactly where it's going, for sure.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, it's a beautiful thing to see it. And like you mentioned, you're taking it to T-shirts, but at the same time, economically, I think it's for as tough as it's been for some of the trailblazers in the legal market, in the legal industry for the last 3.5 years, and at all scales as well. It's important to look at that, because it'd be without doubt that who hasn't projected when and if and when regulations do change, where some of these markets actually open up a little bit. Some of the headaches are alleviated, right? The processes involved. I know, like I mentioned at the beginning, and not to bounce around too much, we don't have to necessarily shut right down at the 30-minute mark. Don't get me wrong. I've been looking at other information in your area, and I'm assuming as a brand yourself and acquainted into the culture and the community, have been hearing with the LDB, the strike and the setback for BC retailers over the duration of the last, past few weeks. And I've been looking into some of that information, and I was again this morning wrapping something up. And I mean, in Manitoba, it's different. We're looking at entities like Toba Grown, the Toba Syndicate, taking it right to the next level of direct distribution, direct delivery. And so, I mean, we're going to be looking at these types of hiccups in the industry all along. So while that all unfolds and we look to universalize certain maneuvers, a topic I prepared for and always wanted to discuss is that exactly. So the festivals being one thing, but consumption lounging, as it all moves towards that, eventually becoming one other thing, you know what I mean? But working out the kinks in the industry, and you've been there, you've seen so much of it. It's I mean, like, even to California to Canada, how is that transition for you as far as the markets go, the product availability?
Yeah, it's just so different. Canada is open California, because I had this opportunity to kind of have open, you just shared and did and kind of created and I feel like that was in Canada, but it was so few people doing it. Then when it's kind of like medical got forgotten about a little bit, it came on and just focused on the money aspect, on bringing that culture that with an entire life, an entire beyond what just the government understands as our industry. Like there were families, there are people who, generationally from their parents, parents, and so that just kind of out of the place, out of the space, and kind of became a little bit more of a rat race. I think in California we had a little bit more of that, of both of the recreational and the medical simultaneously. So that medical, even though it's too greatly outlined, it was still very and then the restrictions about speak Canada is really also really heavy. Educate on certain aspects that knowledge, so that people can really determine how they are feeling of words that we can use here. So me personally, and I went directly into a job at Flower out of Kelowna, BC. I was the educator. To the content I created had to be hacked up and added and reformulated to use a word, and it was just like, oh my gosh,
getting you banned.
Yeah, basically
from platforms.
I was like, you're a speak girlfriend, and I was like, oh, but wait, hold on. To hear about this is what the bud tenders stand about, the medicine, the product itself, super about what they're purchasing, and if we can't use, then we're falling short on what we are. And so that for me was really I'm also really grateful and glad to hound with all the regulatory aspects and with opening up to hearing suggestions. It is that they're missing, and what it is that kind of faltering on a little bit, or no, like they're reaching out to the community members and saying, board with us. Hey, will you volunteer your time to corporation or a company or an LP or a lead in a space to succeed, and so who is the owner of Rosebud Cannabis Farms, been just paramount in getting that to our directors and to us in BC. And he sat on he's volunteering hours, hundreds of hours of his time to really guiding forward what we need to, the restrictions that they for, in order to keep people safe, in order to keep the general public safe. We can really but like merge together. We can merge government bodies and say, this is what people about this plant. This is how convey education in a more positive and better and they're listening, and they're listening. Yeah. And you have the ability to speak to you in the province that you live in. Give them your information and what you desire to, including spaces where we can enjoy in public and we can have something, but a cannabis garden in a garden space. So I think that's really important. And, that's a lot, bringing it back around to the Unicorn Cup, because for our first theme, we have these kinds of incomes, throughout the year that we work on based on what's happening within the market within that year. Theme last year was connecting legal to also connecting recreational to the producers and the producers and the cultivators, so what the governments want and what we would like them to hear us say. And so and this year we did the same thing. Grateful for Brittany Anderson, our local MLA, to have come out to the cottage at Rosebud Lake and enjoyed the property.
That's nice,
but also also saw what and it's not just all about we're doing a lot more than breaking barriers, breaking molds, and it feels really good to be doing that.
I think that definitely says a lot as far as the Canadian industry and the Canadian Cannabis Podcast has run to this point with that representation. I mean, we've rocked out some pretty big players, and I mean, and it just continues to grow and roll that way. But to identify that commitment is there, that identifying it, even again, just exploring the BC Google searches as of late in the market in that area, and what the BC province or the provincial government identifies as far as the LCB and wanting to expand in the industry. So having that representation from an MLA there, definitely, it's not like it's been without, but it's been definitely a gap of time. I think even in the by-elections that I've seen happen in the province this past year, cannabis platform has not been like a part of it. I mean, any sort of functions happening I've been seeing. So I mean, there's still, but it is Manitoba, right? We run on a different model, and we also have no plants per household. So that's all exciting news. Still coming down the line too. If you didn't catch some of the original episodes of the Canadian Cannabis Podcast, Jesse Lavoie of Toba Grown, who I brought up, I mentioned earlier, will also be, I mean, it's September now, so in a couple of weeks, he's going to be heading to Montreal, into Quebec. The federal Supreme Court case is going to unravel finally, and Manitoba and Quebecers are going to be looking at potentially for the first time since legalization having 4 plants per household federally, recreationally, let's say next year. So, right, we're going to be bringing one of those 3 spots I mentioned. We're saving for Jesse. We'll be bringing him back for a recap post announcement. hopefully it's all looking like that, like we're going to be rocking something out for the spring. But either way, more content and dialogue coming down that way, more representation from men and women in the industry, and defining that balance. And Krystal, that's what I especially wanted to thank you for the most. We had such a burst of response coming out of the East initially when we launched everything. And at the time, again, and you know yourself as an organizer, as a planner, kind of getting the ball rolling. So when I started to hit around the 5th, 6th episode, realizing based off of response, going to spread it right out and bring a full balance to the scene from here on in through the rest of the Canadian scene. So representing women in cannabis today, qualified, educated marketer, you're an influencer, Krystal Autumn. Thank you very much for your time today. I know we could probably both go on and on. I've got fireworks on the go. I have websites still to visit from the BC side of things. I'll be looking more into the Unicorn Cup and looking forward to eventually attending that event and repping some of the RMR stuff down that way and flourish. So also a number of things coming, changes as I connect with these guys and I learn from Respect My Region. Much love that way as I close out and throw it out that way. Joey and Mitch really pulling together through the weekend, giving me some more pointers, business. I know I let information slide here and there through my social media, but definitely changes to come and announcements to come with my platform, what I do specifically in the industry and how I do that professionally. So I love it. I love the fact of the opportunity as much as I get to host guests. I feel a guest every day. I still get nervous about this. I'm passionate about the industry. I learn something from everyone that I can on every episode, and it's not just on the episode. Like I said, there's work to be done after. I want to be committed to the R&D through the whole portion of it, and I look forward to staying connected with you, Krystal. So we're connected on Instagram. Everybody follow Krystal. Find her information on the video description. Get it out there. I'll be sharing this video through my feeds after. And much love to family and friends. Again, to supporters and followers, all the like. Krystal, you get to close us out. With no further ado, let's tell us where's the love going. I just smoked, by the way. If you didn't see that, yeah, I had a little chop there. I decided to. I'm baked, obviously. So.
I'm
That's the one. Thank you, CJ's Cannabis and Wellness. Yes.
Yeah, of the Unicorn Cup. I'm PP12. But yeah, I just want to I'd want to say thank you, Jordan. Thanks for covering a little bit about the Unicorn Cup, a bit about Rosebud Cannabis Farms, and a lot about this culture. It's what we need back in our space in general, and that's where we can expect my region is going to bring standing and the education back into the community. And so thank you, Respect My Region, for having me. And you guys can find me on Instagram and you can find me at Nectar's Collective, and then like Rosebud Farms, LT. So all my parts, seeing y'all around. Thanks.